trains run again. Bombed, sabotaged, blown up by the Nazis on the run, French railways are rebuilt by Allied engineers. On D-Day, following secret instructions, Maquis patriots wrecked locomotives, derailed trains, and tore out many sections of the railway system not already buckled by Allied bombing. When they started to retreat, the Germans, as they always do, destroyed what they couldn't take with them. Twisted steel and broken stone are monuments to a defeated conqueror.
Although this extract is taken from a United States publication that does not mention the UK contribution, it is estimated that 90% of the replenished French railway rolling stock was shipped from the port of Southampton by the three Southern Railway ferries HMS Twickenham, HMS Hampton, and HMS Shepperton Sea in the film, as well as HMS Princess Iris.
Early rail operations in Normandy 1944, first published in 1957. Early rail activities were concerned largely with reconnaissance, rehabilitation, and organization for operations on the lines running south of Cherbourg. An advance party of the 2nd Military Railway Service landed at Omaha Beach in two groups on the 17th and the 24th of June 1944 and began a survey of the rail situation. This party followed the combat troops to Cherbourg, arriving there on June 27. The main railway lines in the Cotentin Peninsula were found in fair condition, although the tunnel east of Cherbourg had been blasted. The rail facilities in the vicinity of Cherbourg had been severely damaged, and the enemy had planted the usual mines and booby traps. The nearby marshaling yards and the Cherbourg roundhouse were largely intact, but at the important junction of Folligny the yard was a mass of burned cars and twisted steel amid bomb craters. On the other hand, American troops had captured considerable useful rolling stock, including locomotives, railway wagons, and passenger coaches, all of which had to be examined carefully before being used. The French locomotives were generally old, many dating from the last war. Although a number of the most competent French railway workers had been spirited away by the Germans, those left behind were anxious and willing to work for the Americans. Several French railway men were commissioned in the French army and then attached to the 2nd Military Railway Service, where they proved helpful in re-establishing train service. 2nd Military Railway Service Commander, General Burpy, arrived in France late in June and was followed by the remaining elements of his headquarters and the first operating units. At the end of July, 1 Railway Grand Division, the 707th, 3 railway operating battalions, and 1 railway shop battalion were functioning on the continent. Meanwhile, the engineers had begun the rehabilitation of the railways, maintaining close contact with the Transportation Corps to ensure that the lines reconstructed were those the latter desired. Native railway personnel were employed wherever possible. Actual train operation began early in July. On the 7th, General Ross rode the railway from Cherbourg to Corentin in a jeep with flanged wheels. The first scheduled train over this route was dispatched on July 11. Manned by personnel of the 729th Railway Operating Battalion, this train consisted of a French steam engine and 2 streamlined passenger cars, preceded by a boxcar to cushion the blast of any mine that might be encountered. The run was made without incident. On July 17, timetable number 1 was published for passenger service on the main line from Cherbourg via Corentin to Lyson, a distance of 46.8 miles, and on July 22 the first troop train was operated on that route. To regulate rail traffic, railway train officer personnel drawn from the 3rd Group Regulating Station were placed at Cherbourg, Sottevast, Volognes, Saint-Vaast-la-Hougue, Corentin, and Isigny. The first American railway equipment to reach the continent from the British Isles arrived at Utah Beach on July 10. Intended for work trains, it consisted of 2 150-horsepower diesel locomotives and several flat cars, which had been mounted on trailers and loaded aboard LCTs. The trailers were unloaded directly on the beach, attached to prime movers, and hauled to the main rail line at Chef Dupont. Later in the same month a large shipment of railway rolling stock was landed at Cherbourg from the U.S. Seatrains Lakehurst in Texas. Subsequent cross-channel deliveries were made at this port. By July 31, 1944, 48 diesel and steam locomotives and 184 railway cars had been received from the United Kingdom, and the captured equipment included 100 steam locomotives, 1,641 freight cars, and 76 passenger cars. In addition to the difficulty caused by wartime damage and destruction of bridges, marshaling yards, and tracks, early rail operations in northern France were hindered by frequent breakdowns in communication. Isolated enemy units could easily cut the single temporary wire, usually strung along the right-of-way. When this happened, a courier in a jeep had to dash through the countryside to deliver the orders that kept the trains moving. The water problem also was grave because many of the tanks and pumps were destroyed or damaged. Train crews lacked experience with French facilities and skilled natives were not always available. The equipment for directing traffic at night was poor, and on occasion military railway personnel had to signal with flashlights and cigarette lighters. Much trouble came from overloading, a problem that was solved after the second military railway service began to make up its own trains. At the end of July 1944, rail operations had been extended from Cherbourg to Lyson, and reconnaissance of recently captured lines to the south had begun. Traffic was still light, only 31,907 long tons of freight and 4,524 passengers were hauled during the month. The great period of expansion lay in the future.